So what do we mean by style, or more specifically, rhetorical style? Obviously, when we're talking about writing, we are not talking about the clothes that someone is wearing. We are talking about the way that they ornament their language. What features does it have? What characteristics does it have? So one of the things we can talk about is the kind of words that people are using in their writing, or the level of diction. So if they're using a standard level of diction, they're going to be talking correctly and pretty clearly, but they won't be talking with ornamental language, so it won't draw attention to itself. Things that are in standard diction are most of your communications that occur, things that you just need to get directions on, you just need to read, you just need to communicate with someone. Now, more noteworthy styles include formal or colloquial styles. A formal style would be much more ornamental and complex. So it's got figurative language, it's got fancy words, different constructions, it's more poetic. Something that draws more attention to itself. On the other hand, you have colloquial language, which is your lowest form of diction. It's very informal and very casual. It might include dialect, it might include slang. You'll get things like, in our example here where it says nowadays, contractions, those kinds of things. Usually that's going to happen in an informal situation. That's not going to be how you talk to your boss. I mean, I guess maybe if you're best friends, but it's probably not going to be something that you use in a business situation. When we're looking at word choice, we also want to think about the connotation and denotation of words. So denotation is just the dictionary definition. It's what the word means. But connotation is the extra information that gets carried along with that word. So, for example, the word clever means smart and inventive, as does the word cunning. But if we say the word clever, it has more of a neutral or positive connotation, versus the word cunning, which makes us think kind of negatively, as if someone is being tricky or sneaky. So the choice of words that someone used, whether they chose to call something clever or cunning, can tell us more information than just the denotation would tell us. On the sentence level, we can look at how the sentence structure is working in writing. Is the writer using a lot of short sentences? Or perhaps using some short sentences in some very specific places? Short sentences can be very dramatic. They could be comic or emphatic. Just imagine if someone says, "No, stop." That's much more abrupt than, "Would you please stop doing that right now?" So when we're writing and we give those short, punchy sentences, it can have a certain effect on the reader. On the other side, you have long sentences. Sometimes long sentences are necessary if ideas are complex. They can explain, they can connect ideas, they can take the time to tell you how things are related to each other, and therefore create more of a flow to carry readers through, to keep readers going. It's hard to stop reading in the middle of a sentence, so they carry readers on to their conclusion. And of course, medium-ish sentences, obviously they can serve many, many purposes, sort of like standard diction. They're in the middle. They can do just what needs to be done to make communication happen. We can also look at sentence structure, not just length, but how the sentence is composed to see some certain features. So for example, parallel structure in a sentence, where two things are lined up the same way, more or less. Ulysses can be finished. The internet is never finished. Parallel structure draws relationships between the two things that are not exactly the same in the sentence. So, can be finished versus is never finished. Ulysses versus the internet. It draws those relationships. Writers can include interruptions in sentences that it forces readers to pay attention because it breaks their attention off from the flow of the sentence to pay attention to something else. It emphasizes whatever the writer has apparently considered the sentence worth interrupting for. Fragments are like short sentences. They're abrupt and hard-hitting. They stop you, and they also make you pause and look at what's going on. We had an example on the previous slide. Unusual punctuation marks also get attention. So using commas and ellipses and dashes, you can get pauses. If someone is using exclamation points, that's going to provide emphasis. That's not very common in writing. Colons to present ideas. Semicolons, where you imply a pause but not a complete separation of two sentences. Those are all things to look at if you're looking at structural effects. You can also look if something is repeated. So repetition gives emphasis. It, like parallelism, draws connections between what is the same, and it also emphasizes the part of the sentence that does get repeated. Similar to repetition and just parallelism in general is the construction we call antithesis. Antithesis is when the structure is parallel, but it's being used to emphasize a contrast. So what is the same between two things is being used to emphasize the actual differences between the two subjects. Now, in formal language and in most writing that you're going to be reading that's written for an audience, there's going to be some kind of figurative language that's going to be trying to add interest to what is being discussed and to increase communication, to help people understand. So using figurative language both makes the language more interesting and helps provide meaning. Allusion is a reference to history or literature. An analogy is an extended comparison between two things. We're used to metaphors and similes, right? Compare things using like or as. We bring in the idea of one thing to help communicate ideas about something else. And those are just a few of the stylistic features that you'll be seeing in language that you can talk about when you're performing a rhetorical analysis or really just considering how any argument is constructed.